June 19, 1944. Over the blue expanse of the Philippine Sea, history witnessed one of the most one-sided battles ever fought. In a single day, America's carrier pilots would annihilate nearly 400 Japanese aircraft. An event so brutal, it would be remembered forever as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. But this was more than a battle. It was the death of Japan's naval air power, and the moment the balance of the Pacific shifted forever. By the summer of 1944, the Pacific War had entered a decisive phase. For nearly 3 years, Japan had fought ferociously to expand and defend its empire. But the tide had turned after Midway, Guadalcanal, and the relentless U.S. submarine campaign that strangled Japan's lifelines across the ocean. America's wartime industry now stood unmatched. Shipyards and factories churned out carriers, aircraft, and submarines faster than Japan could replace a single loss. In the Central Pacific, the Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam formed Japan's outer defensive wall. If these islands fell, American B-29 bombers would be within range of Tokyo itself. Japan's leaders knew the stakes. Losing the Marianas meant losing the war. On June 15, 1944, U.S. Marines and Army troops stormed ashore on Saipan under Operation Forager. They faced fierce resistance. Japanese troops entrenched in caves and bunkers fought with artillery, mortars, and suicidal banzai charges. Behind those men on the beaches stood the immense power of the U.S. Fifth Fleet, commanded by Admiral Raymond Spruance. Supporting him was Admiral Mitscher's Task Force 58, the most powerful carrier armada ever assembled. 15 fleet carriers and hundreds of aircraft waited to dominate the skies. The American plan was bold yet simple: seize Saipan, secure the Marianas, and build airfields from which B-29s could bomb the Japanese homeland. For Tokyo, the invasion sounded alarm bells. The Imperial Japanese Navy activated Operation Eigo, its long-planned, decisive battle strategy. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa's mobile fleet, 9 carriers, 5 battleships, and over 400 aircraft set sail. Japan's plan was to lure the Americans into a massive carrier showdown, overwhelm them with coordinated strikes, and reclaim the Pacific. But behind the impressive numbers lay a fatal weakness. Japan's elite aviators, the veterans of Pearl Harbor, Coral Sea, and Midway, were gone. Most had been killed or exhausted after years of war. Their replacements were green, hastily trained young men, many barely able to land on a carrier deck. Some had logged less than 100 hours of flight time. Their aircraft told the same story. The once feared Mitsubishi Zero remained agile but fragile, lacking armor and self-sealing fuel tanks. Facing them was the American F-6F Hellcat, rugged, fast, armed with 6.50 caliber machine guns and guided by radar-directed interception. Japan was gambling with outdated planes, undertrained crews, and sheer desperation. The outcome was inevitable. At dawn on June 19, 1944, Ozawa launched the first strikes of the battle. 4 massive waves of aircraft, over 400 planes, rose from his carriers and thundered across 200 miles of ocean toward the U.S. fleet. Their mission: destroy Task Force 58, sink the carriers, and save Saipan. But the Americans were ready. Radar aboard picket ships detected the incoming raids long before they came into visual range. Fighter direction officers vectored waves of Hellcats skyward, positioning them with altitude and surprise. What followed was slaughter. Wave after wave of Zeros, Judies, and Kates were cut down before they ever reached their targets. Pilots later described the battle as a turkey shoot. The skies were filled with burning wrecks, Japanese planes spiraling into the sea, shattered by streams of gunfire. By midday, nearly 250 Japanese aircraft had been destroyed. America's losses were minimal. The myth of Japanese air superiority had finally been shattered. While the Hellcats ruled the skies, U.S. submarines stalked the seas below. The first strike came from the USS Albacore, which slipped into position against Japan's newest carrier, Taihō. A spread of torpedoes struck home, At first, the damage seemed controllable, but hours later, gasoline fumes ignited in a catastrophic explosion that tore the mighty Taihō apart. Moments later, USS Kavala found the veteran carrier Shōkaku. 6 torpedoes raced through the water. 3 found their mark. Explosions ripped through her decks as flames consumed her. Within minutes, Shōkaku, one of the few survivors of Pearl Harbor, rolled over and sank, taking more than 1,000 sailors with her. 2 of Japan's most important carriers were gone within hours. Ozawa's command structure collapsed. His flagship destroyed, his fleet scattered, and his air groups annihilated. The mobile fleet was falling apart. By nightfall on June 19th, Ozawa's once proud fleet was in chaos. The air groups sent to Guam never returned. Most were shot down or crashed on overrun airstrips. Carriers now floated helplessly, flight decks empty, pilots gone, coordination lost. In contrast, Admiral Mitscher's Task Force 58 stood almost untouched. Out of hundreds of Japanese aircraft, nearly 300 had been destroyed. The U.S. lost fewer than 30, most to operational accidents. On Saipan, the Japanese defenders received the grim news. No air or naval support would be coming. Admiral Nagumo, the man who led the attack on Pearl Harbor, now faced inevitable defeat. As night fell, the waters around the Marianas shimmered with oil slicks and burning debris. Japan had not only lost planes and ships, it had lost the ability to protect its empire. At dawn on June 20th, American scouts finally located the remnants of Ozawa's fleet, retreating over 300 miles west of Saipan. This was the opportunity Mitscher had waited for. Though daylight was fading, he gave the order: launch the strike. Over 200 aircraft roared off American flight decks, one of the largest carrier strikes of the war. They flew for hours over open ocean, guided only by their navigators and faith. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they found their targets. Bombs and torpedoes rained down upon the fleeing Japanese carriers. The light carrier Hiyō was struck multiple times, her decks engulfed in flame before erupting in a massive explosion and sinking. Others, like Shōkaku and Hiyō, were left battered and burning, but triumph came at a cost. As night closed in, many American pilots ran low on fuel. In a daring decision, Mitscher ordered all carriers to switch on their lights, turning them into glowing beacons in hostile waters. The move saved countless lives, though dozens of aircraft still ditched at sea. By the end of June 20th, the Japanese carrier force was shattered beyond repair. Taihō, Shōkaku, and Hiyō lay at the bottom of the Philippine Sea. More than 400 aircraft were gone, and with them, the last of Japan's trained carrier pilots. Ozawa's retreat was desperate, his once mighty fleet now little more than empty hulls drifting westward. The U.S. Fifth Fleet remained intact. Task Force 58 ruled the Pacific. In Tokyo, the defeat sent shockwaves through the government. Prime Minister Hideki Tojo's cabinet collapsed within weeks. Japan's dream of turning the tide at sea was over. The Battle of the Philippine Sea was one of the most lopsided naval engagements in history. It proved the power of radar, superior training, and industrial might in modern warfare. In just 2 days, Japan lost its carrier air arm, the very weapon that had once brought terror to Pearl Harbor. Nearly 400 planes vanished from the skies. 3 carriers sank beneath the waves. For America, it was the moment that confirmed victory was inevitable. For Japan, it was the day the sky itself was lost. The Pacific would never be the same again.